According to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, or the SCP, the argument from causal closure is perhaps the dominant argument for physicalism in the literature today. I think a parallel argument can be made for idealism by reformulating causal closure and holding irreducible consciousness to have causal powers. Premise 1. The causal closure of the universe. Causal closure usually means that all physical events must be due to physical causes. I think what is fundamental to this idea is that all events are caused from events that are the same in type. In other words, events must be of the same kind of substance and properties in order to interact. A big motivation for this is the rejection of overdetermination. Overdetermination is seen as one of the non-starters in the mental causation debate, and its rejection is widely supported in the literature. Not only is it redundant for an effect to have two or more sufficient causes, but it seems that if a cause is different, then the effect is different as well. What is even more disturbing is that if one rejects causal closure, they will inevitably face the interaction problem. How is it possible for two distinct substances and properties to interact? Such an interaction conflicts with modern science and is uncomfortably like magic. According to the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, or the IEP, one of the reasons that this dualistic interaction is scientifically unacceptable is that it violates the well-established principle of the conservation of energy. If physical energy is needed to do physical work, then a convergence of mental energy into physical energy would result in an inexplicable increase in energy. These problems involved in mind-body causality are commonly considered decisive refutations of interactionism. Premise 2. The irreducibility of consciousness. The hard problem of consciousness is widely taken to be a fatal problem for reductionism. If reality is purely objective and quantitative, then there's no room for a subjective and qualitative phenomenon like consciousness, and a physical explanation of consciousness leaves out what it is like to be the subject for the subject. If reductionism were true, then nothing would be left out, and this is a fatal inconsistency. In order to preserve the existence of consciousness, then we must hold the mental as irreducible, and so the mental is its own substance with its own kind of properties. Premise 3. The causal efficacy of consciousness.
You want to see spirituality move something? Watch. I decide consciously to raise my arm, and the damn thing goes up.
Not only are the mind's causal powers rightfully taken for granted in everyday experience and in scientific practice, but they are fundamental to contemporary psychology and philosophy. As stated in the conclusion section of the SCP's entry on behaviorism, psychologists and philosophers largely agree that the explanation of behavior cannot omit invoking a creature's experience of the world, and that psychology without mental causation is explanatorily impaired. When you add up all the premises, the conclusion is that physical events are mental events, which means idealism is true. If all events are caused by events that are the same in type, and the mental is subjective and qualitative in type, and mental events cause physical events, then physical events must be mental in type. So the universe, and everything that can be interacted with, is mental. The conclusion follows logically from the premises, so the only way to deny the conclusion is to deny one or more of the premises. If we deny the first premise, then we'll be stuck with the mind-body problem, and our account of causal interaction will be incoherent. If we deny the second premise, then we'll be stuck with the hard problem of consciousness and have no room for consciousness. If we deny the third premise, then not only are we contradicting what we experience in our daily lives, but we would be out of step with the scientific evidence. So the only way to keep the irreducibility and causal efficacy of consciousness, while also affirming causal closure, is to embrace idealism.